Hello, welcome to the Rooms with Ronald podcast, brought to you by the Multifamily Media Network. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington. In 2023, I set an intention to shop 100 apartment communities to see how leasing was evolving around the country. Rooms with Ronald was born out of that experience. In this series, I share my experiences and engage in meaningful conversations with other professionals in the industry as we discuss all things related to leasing and marketing. Join in as we expand the Rooms with Ronald experiment. Hello, and welcome to a new edition of Rooms with Ronald. I'm your host, Ronald Harrington, and on this podcast, we talk all things leasing and marketing. We have a great episode in store for you guys today. I am joined by Steven Biringer, who is the VP of Strategy for Appfolio. Steven, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Ronald. Excited to be here.
Perfect. Well, you are in sunny Santa Barbara, and I am in humid Indiana. So I think we kind of got that covered so far today.
Yep. I grew up in the Midwest, though, so I know what you're going through. Don't worry about it.
My hair, you can't tell, is like, you would think I was in Dallas with my big hair today. Well, I know that Appfolio just released their renter preference report, like just a couple weeks ago. Do you mind kind of giving us the backstory of what that is and what it entailed?
Yeah, absolutely. So the renter preferences report is a survey that we conduct, and we will be conducting it ongoing to inform everybody in the industry about the renter preferences and how they evolve over time. And our reason for doing that is, markets from the macro perspective, of course, are changing. Renters are always important, but particularly when vacancy rates are changing and competition is increasing, we want to continually inform and provide thought leadership in the industry that we can. And so we found this as an opportunity to hear the voice of the renters from the large base of renters we have on the Appfolio platform, and survey them in terms of, are they wanting to move? Why would they want to move? What services are attracting them and not attracting them into the units where they're going? What do sort of their relationship with their property manager or their relationship with their maintenance experiences, how do those affect their preferences and their choices to leave, to not leave, and where to move and all of that. And so, so we just released that. We've gone through the data. We published sort of a summary report of all of that. We can talk through a few points of that and many other topics, whatever you'd like to cover today.
Perfect. Well, one of the things that caught my eye is when I was going through the report is right off the bat, we talk about why it's so important right now to kind of do the resident journey and what they're looking for, right? Because we know that in 2024 and 2025, we're expecting 500,000 new apartment homes to be delivered each year. So in the next, 2 years, we're looking at 1 million new apartment homes online. So why is it so important right now to prioritize the resident experience, knowing we have that many apartment homes coming online?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I mean, it's important because we want to fill those units, and we want to fill them economically. I think another statistic that is really interesting to me, Moody's is tracking the concession levels, and they're at an all-time high as well. In fact, higher than they've ever been tracked since being tracked, concession levels, right? And so you see some folks coming in with different methods for how to do concessions. Some are using sort of rewards points and other things like that to try and create new ways to do concessions. But I think that's just a part of the example as to it's a competitive market right now. You talk about supply. That's not changing, right? Another part of the report that as we publish that, there's a lot still under construction. And even with the visibility we have, and there might be a ton more construction starts that are going to happen, the rest of this year into 25, but we're going to see those rates continue for at least 2 more years. And so because of that, property managers need to continually be thinking about how to be competitive, because we don't always want to win on concessions alone and just throw money at the problem. We want to be able to provide differentiated experiences, both in terms of the units and buildings themselves and the amenities that are provided, the services that are provided to those residents, and then just the experience in general. Like the data as it comes out of the preference survey shows us that relationship they have through that leasing process and sort of the care and the TLC that's given in that process can materially change their perspective on choosing a place. And that's not economical. That's something that you or anybody in the industry can affect just by showing up, right? So it is extremely important at this point to focus on that.
Well, I also think too, when we talk about concessions, like in my experience, I learned that the higher the concession, the poorer the customer service was. So we made up from there. And that concession is only going to be offered when they move in. So we're going to be in this never ending cycle, right? So I move in, I get the concession. Well, we know we have to make up that money somewhere, right? Like it's just not free money. So it's usually at the time of renewal when we're going to take this money and say, okay, well, now your renewal increase is going to be a little bit more because we have to make up that difference. And so then they're going to move out and we're going to need to offer it again. So I think it's so important that we prioritize that, because we hear a lot about, the prospect journey, and we hear a lot about, the customer experience. But what I feel like I'm seeing a lot more of is that the customer experience stops when they move in. Like we got them in now, we don't have to do the experience anymore, right? They're going to live with us forever.
Yeah, and again, from the renter preferences survey, it shows that if that relationship with the property manager is unsatisfactory, it's close to 30 percentage points that higher likelihood that they're going to be looking. So if you're not delivering that experience after move-in, and focused on that, you're not going to retain residents at the rate you could if you were focused on it. 100% agree.
Yeah. Well, I also found it was very interesting that you guys had found out that there was people looking to move in the next 12 months, right? So I'm looking at it, and part of the problem was maintenance. We see some dissatisfaction with maintenance, which it comes no shock to me in that standpoint. But I was shocked to see that 86% of renters were likely to recommend their property management company because 86% of them were satisfied with maintenance. So that was like a little bit of a shock to me when I kind of like read that a little bit, because I feel like we always hear the negative, right? Maintenance, they're not coming to fix my work orders, or the air conditioners on, all of that. So that kind of shocked me when we looked at that. And I was like, well, good. We're finally investing in our maintenance teams.
Yeah, 100% agree. The other thing I'd add on that too, that I think would be interesting, and I wonder if you've heard about folks applying this to the maintenance process, but there's a really interesting book. I believe it was written by the same group that created NPS. So if you've heard of like the Net Promoter Score, it's a very popular score used for companies and other things. They went on to do more research and came out with this book called The Effortless Experience. And what you don't have to read the book, because I can tell you the main takeaway right now. But the main thing is, it's not so much about, are you satisfied with your customer experience? Now, keep in mind, a maintenance from end to end is a customer interaction, right? No doubt. And it's not about the satisfaction. It is about their effort. How much effort did it take that resident in the entire process? Like, how easy was it to notify, and then to help triage, to schedule the maintenance, and then to close it out, or to let them in and get the problem fixed? If we in the industry can focus on that effort level, and using digital tools on the maintenance intake side and communication through resident portals and so forth, and then other technology and how the vendors are dispatched and how they show up and repair, that effort is the highest correlated metric for whether or not they're happy. And so when you talk about, that they're 86%, or was it 89?
It was
86.
86. Yeah.
86% are satisfied and with maintenance. I would bet you that those are low effort experiences that those residents are having. Just a kind of a fun sort of like out of real estate industry kind of finding that we could bring in more and more, I think.
Yeah, I think like that's something that our industry needs to get better at doing is looking at these other industries and what they're doing because people are used to seeing that, right? It's not like we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just need to take the concepts and apply them to our business. And so, which brings me to my next topic, being Appfolio being a technology platform, right? So, how are our consumer technology trends driving today's resident expectations?
I mean, I think I think resident expectations for technology have always been high. I think it becomes a bit more of like a relative comparison in real estate, right? And so it's like if you lived at one place and you were paying with a check, you can only be delighted, if there's any use of technology. So
Yeah.
my point is, it's like I don't think we need to overstate and say that we need like the slickest of everything and that it has to be perfect and 100% automated and you have to use Alexa to like do everything, in this uber high tech. Now, don't get me wrong, Appfolio is extremely excited about all of the potential, whether it's AI, which is a buzzword. We can talk about that if you want to. I have my own opinions on that. Whether it's AI, it's tech, right, in the whole smart home world, and whether it's control access or just like anything. And then there's the way the resident interacts with the property manager to get their stuff done. Like, how do you pay your rent? How do you submit a work order? How do you talk to your neighbors, right? How do you even when you're moving in, like what are the engagement touch points for application, for how do you find the unit, and then paying your security deposit and your move-in checklist and all of that. So it is relative, but I will say this, that we are seeing more and more focus on consumer grade tech in the hands of the resident. And then there's this difference between, and I'll be brief here, and then because you might have some follow-ups, but I do think there's also this difference between just raw technology that the property managers can use to make their operations better, and then like the consumer grade touch that just makes it that much better, right? And so, Appfolio as an example, we're working on consumer grade products for our residents. We're excited about the future of that. We have a lot of investment behind that. And so we'd be excited to talk about a lot of that later on. Everything the resident will do with Appfolio will be consumer grade. But even if you just think about like these, like a leasing assistant from like first contact to scheduled tour, right? If you're not using one of those assistants at this point, you're massively missing out in terms of like your sales velocity. I think it was more forgiving in times when it wasn't so hard to fill units. But here, I'll give you one other statistic on sort of like inbound sales. And this is another stat that comes from outside of the industry. But if somebody calls you trying to look for something, right? It's like, I want X software, or I want this apartment. Have you heard of the 5-minute rule? You might have in your experience, but the 5-minute rule is if you can respond within 5 minutes, you are 20 times more likely to get that person into the sales cycle. Okay. And it's like, these are like order of magnitude numbers, right? And then it's like, if you pick up the phone within 5 minutes and call, you're 100 times more likely to actually contact them, because they're in that moment, they're on their phone, they're hitting Zillow, they're hitting apartments, and they're getting to you. And then the second that you don't, 5 minutes goes by, it's like the world has changed, right? They're at a movie, they're at a restaurant, they're like, they found another apartment. Right. And so I think, a lot of these tools that have come out where it's like that this person could be on their phone, watching Netflix at 11 p.m. And if you have one of these leasing assistants sort of plugged in that can respond instantly, it makes all the difference. So as far as consumer expectations, I think there's expectations of like swiftness of reply, of like contact, of like a seamless sales process. And then there's that consumer grade touch that, in all the technology that we try to put the polish on.
Yeah, I think, one of the statistics I heard in recent years was that 83% of people expect a response in 20 minutes or less.
Yeah, very similar.
Which is so crazy, right? Like, I'm like, I barely had time to read the email and comprehend what you were looking for, but I will definitely kind of like pick up that phone and call you. And I do think like we want, technology. It's everywhere. I was in Vegas over the 4th of July. I was just there the other week. And now it's like the days of calling down from your room to the valet stand are gone, right? Like you don't call down, it's you can text message at some of the hotels. I stayed out, you can text message, but now there's kiosk in, like when you walk up to the valet stand, you scan your barcode, they pull up your card and you still interact with the person that way. So I tend to go to Vegas a lot and I tend to look around and see, okay, what is happening in Vegas? Because that's going to be in multifamily in the next 5 years, because we tend to be like 5 years behind. Except for I am still waiting for my tipsy robot to come and make for me at my apartment community. So it's coming though. But
it's coming. Yeah.
Caesars has their whole text chat. Her name is Ivy. You can text with Ivy and things like that. So let's talk about AI. Give me your thoughts on the AI in multifamily.
Well, the hype cycle is real, but the inflection is also real. And so what I mean by that is AI has been a thing forever. We all know that. We invested early. We had an acquisition of a company called Dynasty. They had the Lisa product, which was our digital leasing assistant. That's more common these days. That's kind of what I was referencing earlier with the leasing quick response and all that. But that was like 5 years ago. We acquired that company. Like nobody was doing that at the time, right? So, but we put tens of millions of dollars in after that, in general AI. And kind of where we're at, and the reason I said I had opinions is I think AI is just like, it will become what like HTML is to the web. Like if you've built a web page, that's built on HTML, or like today, like it might be, probably still some relic of that. And it's like, you don't ever come out and say, we have this brand new web page technology with HTML. You're like, you don't say that. Like, it's just like, that's how the world works. It's just like on, like that platform. And so AI is just like that. It's just, it's the idea of bringing in large amounts of data to make predictions. Right. And then at some point, there's different applications of AI, the deep learning, machine learning, of course, now large language models, and how all of that applies. The reason I say that we're at an inflection, though, is the wave of large language models as they are today is not slowing down. Like the rate at which we've passed the Turing test of like, is AI sentient? Like we already passed that test. Now, it doesn't mean that like we have general intelligence yet. We're not there. But the point I'm trying to make is the democratization of these highly, highly capable technologies is real. And so we bump into startups now who are doing incredible things because they can have access to these large language models. But let me just make one other point, and then I'll pause. The reason this is interesting is it's not just, like we're going to have this little leasing agent bot that will talk to you. What Appfolio is investing in is it changes the way you interact with software, period. Right. Mm-hmm. And so the old are the days that you would log in and have to learn some screen and like, where do I click 7 times to like find this one spot in the web page, back to HTML, where I can like find the tenant ledger so I can like make a return, or where I can like submit this guest card, right? We believe that through these large language models and then applying them in our code, that you can use natural language to interact with software. So you can just say, you can speak into your phone and say, add a guest card, this is the name, this is the phone number, and it will literally just say, it's done. And that's where we're moving. And Appfolio has that literally live in customers' hands today, stuff like that. So the reason I say the hype cycle is real is because it's been overhyped a bit. And so it's always going to take longer than you think. But the inflection is real, where we're going to see dramatic changes in the way software, you interact with software, and the things that software can do. But it's just exciting. I think we're really seeing an evolution of it's not so much how is AI replacing jobs as it is how does AI augment every job, right? And so I think in the leasing world, it's going to make leasing um, so much more intelligent. And you talk a lot in your podcast about like the personal touch, right? And like whether you do a little digging on a person before they show up. Like imagine tools where it does a little bit of that digging for you and it almost serves it up in a nice way in that moment for you to be able to like have that walkthrough in a way that's like personal, right? And
Yep.
but AI is doing some of that lifting. That's the type of augmentation we're excited about.
Well, and I also think we talk about it from like the consumer being like the prospect or the resident. I think what's going to happen in the near future is we're going to start hearing about this in the hiring process. Like people seeking job seekers are not going to want to work for a company that does not have some sort of AI, especially new leasing people. Like if you have to sit them down and train them from the ground up and say you have to call every inbound lead that's coming in, they're going to be like, this isn't for me, right? Because they've gotten so used to that technology just in their personal life. Like everyone's used to Chat GPT and all those different models, right? And so we're going to start seeing the shift. So the companies that aren't on board with it now, it's going to be a twofold for them because they're going to be able to not retain talent or to get the talent. And then their prospects and their residents are also going to leave because they don't have that at their fingertips, because we want everything at our fingertips, right? Like I want to be able to search everything and it give me the answer. And then I only want to talk to a person when I'm ready to make the decision. I had to cancel a dentist appointment yesterday. And the thought of having to call the dentist, be on hold, like do those whole things was like, it was just mind blowing to me. And I was like, you know what? They text me to confirmation. So I just text back and rescheduled my appointment all via text while talking to someone. I didn't have to pick up the phone. So I think we're going to kind of see it from that angle as well.
So I know you're asking the questions, but if I could ask one question,
Yeah.
one of the early things, so almost 5 years ago when I joined Appfolio, I worked on the Lisa team. So I was helping onboard leasing agents onto this new technology of, hey, I used to call out all the guest cards back and I used to schedule everything. Now it's getting auto scheduled and I feel like I'm losing a little bit of control. We face challenges on the behavioral change of folks changing the way they work. Are you seeing an evolution in sort of the leasing world in terms of like broad stroke across, leasing talent, that they're open to these tools?
Yeah, I'm starting to see the shift from, oh my God, it's going to take my job, and to now it's more of a, I need this tool to be successful. And so it's so funny you talk about, Lisa and all of that, because I was in graduate school and one of the companies, I have a master's in property management, and one of the companies that's on our advisory board was using Lisa at the time. And so
Nice.
they would come in and they would tell us, hey, here's what Lisa does. And like, it has an Outlook calendar and all of that. So I was like, okay. And like some of the students like in undergrads are like, well, they're going to take our jobs. I'm like, actually, no, it's going to be more beneficial. It's going to allow you to do the things that you don't want to do. Like a lot of people know, I don't like a lot of admin work. Admin work isn't my favorite thing to do, right? It's like, I feel like it's a necessary evil. So if I could find, an assistant that does it, like I use dictation a lot on my phone just to like, so it will type it out for me, long gone than me like having to type it out. It will summarize it. A lot of times I will take podcasts that I'm listening to, if they're really long, I will just upload it into like a Chat GPT, tell it to summarize it for me. It spits out the summary of those kinds of things. So like I see like more and more, and I think it's going to continue to kind of go that way where we're not afraid of it. Where I think where we need a little bit of work on it is on that maintenance side of things. How do we help incorporate AI and those kind of things on the maintenance side to make their jobs a little bit easier? Because I would venture to say out of everyone in multifamily, they probably have the hardest jobs of all of us.
Yeah, and I think a part of what makes that true, if you can give me a minute to think about that, it's like you can't get rid of the physical space and the physical nature of maintenance, right? It's like a pipe has burst. It's just like it's a different animal.
Fix it, yeah.
Well, and then the parties involved change. It's
Yep.
the vendors now come into play. And one company that we have a partnership with called Lula. Something that's been interesting about their approach is that they actually require their vendors to use their technology. It's one of the only times I've ever seen that. So what I mean by that is they only allow vendors to come on that will receive the job, track the job, submit like updates and notifications in the Lula app, right? So vendors typically, like, vendors is outside of real estate in a way that's like they're on other technologies, right? They're not on Appfolio, is my point. In this case, Lula has only created a network that uses Lula. And so the resident actually gets this Uber experience where they select the time and they see the little car on the map, like driving to their apartment, right?
Yep.
And just to your point, it's like we were saying that in leasing, we're seeing more momentum toward technology. We're all part of the team. It's, the leasing team, the property management team. In maintenance, it's going to be whether it's your maintenance techs, if you have W-2s, or the vendors. And how do you bring the vendors in to kind of play ball to, like, again, lower that effort score for the residents and make that a magical experience too.
I think we have to make it simple for maintenance. I feel like we get a lot of times, right, in the office staff, they handle technology because we deal with it every day. Whereas maintenance teams, like, I still would walk into properties and I see the old fashioned make ready board on the wall. That's like the whiteboard, and I'm like, your property management software has a make ready board in its system that
Yeah.
everyone can see. And guess what? A lot of the tasks are automated for you, so you don't have to write it out. But there's always that hesitation from that side of people, from the maintenance side, that are just kind of like, I don't know about this, because they don't live and breathe it. Once you can get them past that barrier, I think it makes it easier. And not just for like the office staff, but even from a prospect journey, like, standpoint, right? And I will have faith that those dates are now right, because I've been burned a couple times when I go to tour properties and I'm like, it's not ready. Oh, but it's showing up online that it is, kind of. So let's talk about, renters, and especially our younger renters and this new generation coming in. They're starting, what I've noticed, to place more importance on financial services, online payments. And if their companies aren't doing online payments, good luck getting a Gen Zer to write a check, because they don't even know what it is. Flexible rent, security deposits, all of that. So how can the availabilities of these services influence our leasing journey?
Yeah, well, the one of the most surprising things from the renters preference survey and report was the the preference and desire for those services nearly doubled from the year prior to this report. And that surprised even sort of the internal folks on our side that, look at these services and track that. So there's a very real, I guess you could almost say, I don't know if you, because I know you attend a lot of the industry conferences, and like Flex was like the biggest thing in town maybe 3 years ago or something. I think it's like, I think it's a thing now. You know what I mean? It's like, for sure, some flexible rent options, security deposit alternatives, and I want to talk a little bit about that category. And then, of course, online payments, and like, I would even go into, like, now we're in the world where Built exists on the Built credit card. Now, the Built credit card requires a high credit score and other things. It's not a really universal product, but the idea of it is sort of pervasive, which is like, why am I not being rewarded for the rent that I pay, right? In fact, I'm paying fees. What the heck, right? No other industry charges me fees. And that's a whole relationship with property managers and owners and the property management systems. That's just the way the world is. And do we move beyond that ever, right? And I think there's an option for that.
It's so funny that you talk about, like, Bill, because a couple months ago I did a whole blog article about multifamily really needs a reward system that's not like a bill, but like, we need to be able to incentivize these large companies and companies that we know people are moving around. Why haven't we figured out some way to reward people, right? Maybe it's, you get points for renewal, you get points for referrals, you get points for showing up and posting at resident event. There's all these different things that we can do to incentivize. I don't do anything unless I get a reward, unless I get some sort of points for, like, I don't stay at hotels unless I have an account number there. Like, because I want to build that loyalty for the benefits in the long run. And 9 out of 10 times, it has come back to really help me. I had a flight canceled on Southwest over Memorial Day. And so I'm A-list preferred in the companion pass, and like the long wait line, like I just called the VIP line and they like rebooked me the next day. Had I just been, on a standard ticket, I would have had to waited for 3 or 4 hours to get that call back. So I agree. Like, I think we need a rewards program, and companies need to figure out how they're going to do that, because we know people are moving consistently and more people are staying renters versus buying a house. So I think that's kind of like the nice part of the security alternatives.
Yeah, and I think all of this kind of comes together. I think it's all a bit of one category. It hasn't quite evolved that way in the industry yet, but I think this is our perspective at Appfolio. It's like the financial health and situation of the renter matters, should matter to us. It matters to us, should matter to property managers and the leasing offices and the maintenance offices. And the reason is if their satisfaction with like maintenance affects their living there, you better believe their like financial situation, if it can be affected and benefited, right? Whether it's through credit reporting and their credit score boosts because of something that their rental experience did for them. And so I think all of these products kind of come together. I wanted to make that one small comment on security deposit alternatives, because I've seen another wave of innovation that I think is interesting, which is almost like more of a security deposit management product. So the alternatives come in the form of bonds or insurance and they're confusing products, to be honest.
Yeah.
How they work. It's like, do I still have to pay if I and so you have to read all the fine print on those. But I would say net, they're beneficial to the market, right? It does create a lower barrier for folks. It like the moral hazard is there's like some mixed data, but it tends to like lean toward like it's not some major issue that like there's the moral hazard problem there. But the security deposit management products, those are more designed around, well, you still pay your deposit, you just pay it over time. So it lowers the barrier, but doesn't create all these weird like bond or insurance relationships.
Yeah.
And then it takes like the workload and compliance load off of, let's say, a regional property management company. So you can just kind of pass off the security deposit collection process. But back to that main point about rewards and everything, we 100% agree, Ronald. It's like you should be rewarded for rent. You should have some kind of cohesive financial relationship with your rental the way that you do with a home. And the more we can kind of create that experience and package it in a way that the resident sees as a true benefit, I think that will be a material differentiator for property managers that embrace that and that they deliver that to their residents.
Yeah. So, we spend some time talking about PropTech, and we know that PropTech technology can improve satisfaction and it can improve performance across the boards if it's done correctly. But a lot of times, if it's not, it has the adverse effect and it can be a negative experience. Do you have any tips on selecting the right technology providers and how to introduce these technologies successfully to our on-site teams?
Yes, for sure. So this is hard. It is very hard I would say the implementation is harder than the selection, but we can go, there's sort of two questions there, right?
Yep.
On the selection, and I want to caveat, this is a personal viewpoint. So I don't know if this is like, I haven't read a research paper on this. I personally have experienced that if you make the selection of software a group and team effort, it's more likely to succeed. And the reason is if you show up one day and slap down, I'm just going to make a joke and slap down a CD-ROM and be like, install this on your computer and must do this, that is not a good way to start, asking somebody to change the way they do their job. And so I think, if I had to share two principles for selection, it would be A, use the team to do it. And I get it. It's like, if you're a leader that likes command and control and you're like, I can't possibly create a democracy of like 10 people to decide on what product to use, I'm telling you, it's worth it to try to get everybody on the same page before you select it. The second is just timing. Like, just do it quickly. This kind of stuff drains you. I'll make an interesting comparison, actually. So in my role leading strategy at Appfolio, we also do, we're not a very acquisitive company, Appfolio isn't, but my team also owns the M&A function. So if we were to do a merger or acquisition, our team is doing that work. And we do speak to companies often about that. I'm going to tie it back to vendor selection in a second here. But if you talk to any CEO of any of these companies, like the companies that you've probably looked at for for enhancing sort of your leasing function or your property operations, those CEOs have the same balance where they're like, I have venture capitalists calling me all day long, every day, filling up my inbox. But I have to compartmentalize, when am I fundraising and when am I building the product and delivering the product for my customers, right? And the really good CEOs do a great job of keeping that window tight and closed and then opening it very intentionally, being quick, and then raising money and then closing it. And so I know for a fact that all operators in this industry get inundated with vendors trying to sell them software or tools or services. And I think it's the same thing. We have to have this principle of lock down and say, I am not having these conversations, and then choose when you will intentionally and quickly do that, and then use the team to make the decision. So that's on the selection. I'll pause there if you have any thoughts or questions on that piece.
No, I agree. Like I feel like we're getting to almost a tech fatigue because we have all these new products and we just keep rolling them out because it's the shiniest and the greatest. And then like we roll it out and we're paying money. And then in 6 months, someone comes back and say, well, you're not using it correctly, or we need this software. And we're like, we need to really hone in on what we already have and figure out, is it a compliance issue or is it, it just wasn't what we thought it would needed to be. And getting this, the committee together, and it doesn't have to be a lot of people, right? But I think you have to have the end user in mind. So who is it going to affect the most? If you're looking at leasing software, you need your strong leasing professionals on there for their input, because they're going to be the ones living and breathing it every single day, and they're going to become your subject matter experts.
Yeah, and if they're not behind it, like as an example, if they just say, I don't want to use a tool, that's a leadership weakness you have. I'm not accusing you. I'm just saying that one would have, rather than like not choosing the right. I mean, that's up to the leader of the company to get that leasing representative there to the point where they see the benefits. And so bringing everybody to the table and explaining to them like why technology is going to carry the business forward. The one other piece on the implementation, this is the much harder part to do well. And you talked about this in terms of, is it a compliance problem? Is it like, what was the problem? One of the things that I've seen work the best is it's kind of like an eat your own dog food kind of thing, but it's not exactly that line. It's like, of course there's a tone from the top. It's like the tone from the top is saying this is important. I think it's important for the top to do it. So it's almost like, whatever, choose your number is like 60 days to form a habit. So you need some minimum window, and you need compliance close to 100% for 60 days or whatever that window is. So, but what I've found is, in order to hit that compliance level, you almost need people who aren't supposed to be doing that job. And you do the, like, I don't know if you call it secret shopper thing or whatever, right? But you do that kind of effort, right?
I do.
And you do. And so it's a little bit of that, but it's like, hey, let the CEO go and use the technology for maintenance or use the technology for leasing, and like do it for a week, and then they can make their own judgments. And then it's almost like that same group that came together to select is the same one kind of locking arms in that first 60 days to like figure this out. Because if you just say, okay, these two people go and like figure out and tell us if it worked, and then I will say that tech fatigue is real. And some companies, I think, are overdoing it. I think they're trying too many things, and then they're like spreading too thin, and they're not getting real results. And it's bad data where they're making some of their decisions. Maybe they get lucky, but yeah, I think you got to be selective.
Perfect. Well, Steven, thank you so much. If listeners want to look at the full renter's preference report, where would they find it at?
So I would just search Renter Preferences Report Appfolio online, or you can go to our web page and navigate to it. So that's how to do that.
Perfect. And if people wanted to reach out to you and ask you questions, where would they find you?
LinkedIn is going to be the best spot for that, but I'm always perusing that inbox and would love to connect with more people. So I appreciate you having me on, Ronald. Appfolio appreciates it. We appreciate what you do.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining, listeners. I will be sure when we post this on LinkedIn and all of that the renter survey preference report is tagged as well. Steven will be tagged as well. So if you have questions and you want to find him there as well. Steven, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed this conversation. I could probably have talked another hour or two on it, but I know you're in Santa Barbara. It is sunny, it's warm, and we all have jobs to do. So thank you so much. And until next time, guys, happy leasing.
Thank you for tuning in today. I hope I left you with some fresh ideas or a new perspective. Leasing and marketing are evolving rapidly, and Rooms with Ronald is committed to offering a place to hear about those changes. We also celebrate and acknowledge the fundamentals of exceptional service that will never go out of style. So, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, comment, or subscribe. Visit multifamilymedianetwork.com to learn more about our other exceptional industry podcasts, call pieces, and sponsorship opportunities.